This is David Pastor, CEO, Clare House. You're listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello, and in this episode, myself, Alex Owen, academic developer, and Matt Davis, organisational developer, sat down with David Pastor, the CEO of Clare House, a charity that provides care for serious and terminally ill children across Merseyside and the Wirral. We discussed David's approach to leading through the pandemic and the impact lockdown has had on the charity. We hope you enjoy. Okay, David, we're really pleased to be speaking to you today. We're delighted to have a representative of one of our Live to Give charities with us. Live to Give is our volunteering framework, which provides staff with 3 days of volunteering leave each year. So before we start, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you've arrived at the position you're in now?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this today. It's not nice to have a bit of therapy, actually, to talk about me for a bit. Never get to do it. So I started my working life at British Airways, doing a graduate scheme, which was really interesting, but it didn't take me very long before I worked out that I wasn't that bothered about putting people on airplanes. And so I think when that penny drops quite early in your career, you sort of think, well, what else could I do? So I travelled for a bit, cashing in on my BA concessions, and then did a bit of research when I came home, kind of what was the sort of job that I thought I could do. And a job pops up in The Guardian, working for a children's charity called Whizz-Kidz that provide mobility equipment to disabled children. And I applied for a job in events fundraising, so persuading people to run marathons and the like, and got it. And I thought, well, that will do for a year. And here I am 20 years later in the same sector.
Brilliant. And
I suppose, when you're having that careers advice, either at school or university, it's funny that no one ever said to me, you could have a career in the charity sector. It just wasn't a thing. And I suspect that's one of the challenges for society, is that we're preparing people for a future of work, but we don't know what the future of work looks like. And so for me, I meet a lot of people now and try and take the pressure off them to say, well, don't worry about whatever it is you're supposed to do. Follow the things that you're good at and that you're enjoying, and something, usually you'll find your way. And that's certainly how it was for me. So I then realized that I was quite good at this fundraising lark, and persuading people to raise money for a good cause, and it felt good for me. So it was a win-win. And I took on more responsibility and gradually kind of got to a position where I was managing more than fundraising. Moved into the children's hospice sector and picked up more management experience. And I think it's just that kind of something needed to be done, and I would quite happily pick it up. I'd quite happily do it. And the job then was slightly more than 10 years ago, but roughly 10 years ago. And I applied thinking, well, there's no way I'm going to get that job. 36 at the time. Just, bit of fun. Let's apply for it, see what happens. Now, the reason I applied for the job is because my wife's family is from this part of the world. And it just seemed like, why not? Won't get it, so it's not going to be a problem. And of course, then I think I realised halfway through the interview, I remember this sense of panic. They're going to offer me the job. And I thought the interview had gone quite badly so I'd come in to the interview, and I remember this moment of, I think I was the last candidate of the day, and there were just kind of half-drunk mugs of coffee and bits of biscuits and kind of mess all over the place. And there was a volunteer, I think, who was clearing the room. And so I was invited in, and rather than sitting down and, doing my tie and looking all professional, I started to clear the room, which obviously made me stand out from perhaps some of the other candidates. But I remember thinking, oh no, they think they're interviewing a T-boy. So, but it wasn't, it was just if the room needs clearing, I may as well clear it. But I think sort of halfway through the interview, this panic of they're going to offer me the job. And sure enough, driving home back to Oxford, I got the call from the chair of trustees saying, that they'd be delighted to offer me the job. And I remember saying, I can't accept it at this point because I've got people to talk to. I've got a wife, 2 young children. We've got to uproot our entire lives. I just need some time to think about this. And then spent the following 3 days in panic, thinking kind of what on earth do we do here? But it's a point in our lives when it just made sense you're better to regret the things you have done than the things you haven't. And I thought, well, even if I make a mess of it, it'll be an interesting experience. And so here we are 10 years later. Yeah, but it's a case of following my heart, I think.
So what I really like about that story is what you were saying about clearing the coffee cups. And I should have said in our intro that you and I know each other outside of work. So we both volunteer as governors on a governing board for local primary school. And also our children are best friends. So we see each other quite a bit. And one thing I have noticed about you is that kind of servant-heartedness. So we've had you over for dinner and you cleared our table. I remember it very clearly. You did.
Emma was kicking me under the table. My wife was probably saying, pull your finger out.
Yeah, but do you think that that's something that makes you in terms of, obviously you lead at a very, very high level, but do you still keep real in terms of wanting to serve others and to, clear tables, for example?
My job, I view my job as trying to help other people do the best job they can. So it's never, ever, I've never felt comfortable being the big I am or that kind of authoritative leadership is just not me. I'd much rather be in the background. And I'll say to people regularly in any part of our work, just tell me what it is you want me to do. So if I come to an event, give me a brief, I'll do whatever, I'll be on the door. I will say something if you want me to say something, but I'm not going to push myself out there to be what I think. It's not about me, it's about what the children and families need or what our volunteers and staff need. So yeah, I'd rather be behind people, pushing them forwards and helping them to do the best they can. And that's probably my style. It's not to everyone's taste, some people do, particularly in pandemic times. I've had some feedback that is around, we need more forceful leadership. And I suppose I disagree. I think, and we found that in trying to give people space and give people responsibility and allow the right people with the right skills to be involved in the right discussions and shape their own destiny, that for me is far more powerful.
And do you think that leadership style is what drew you to working in this specific field in Clare House? Do you think that for now, at least, that kind of leadership style is required when leading this charity?
I don't know. I don't know. You'll have to ask everyone at Clare House that.
Okay.
I don't think you can dress yourself up into something that you're not. I think if I followed the Alan Sugar book of management and leadership, I think people would think there was an alien that's landed. And yet there are people who lead that way. I think it's outdated. Even in the 70s, 60s and 70s, there's, the top management thinkers were very clear on that concept of essentially servant leadership. It's about bringing the best out in others and not being afraid to get your hands dirty and do whatever needs to be done. It's a great book by Bob Townsend called Up the Organisation. Really worth a read. And it's written in the 70s. And it's his experience of working, I think it's at Avis, and taking Avis car rental and taking it from kind of the doldrums to being the leading car rental business in the US. And it's just fascinating. It's a dead easy read. I mean, it's literally an hour's read, but it kind of goes through his lessons on leadership. And it's just kind of very in your face, but very kind of, that kind of whole concept of leaders eat last, or, don't ask other people to do stuff that you're not prepared to do yourself. Do you really understand your business if you haven't worked on the front line? So one of the things he did was put himself on the check-in desk. Just go and work on the check-in desk. And then you can see all the problems that your organization has. So I wouldn't say I necessarily go that far. I'm very happy so obviously Clare House provides the highest possible quality care, essentially to dying children. And I'm not a nurse. So in terms of competency, I shouldn't be front facing in that sense, but I'm very happy to be with our care team and talk to our care team and to try to understand their challenges and the things that help them to do the best job they can. But it's a balance, you can't, if you're too forceful, you get in the way and you need to give people space to be able to do their job.
David, over the last, last 5 years or so, I've been working with the Charity Learning Consortium on a fair few things, and most recently through their Clear Lessons foundation that they set up. And through those meetings and those events, I found that there's a certain type of person that works in the charitable sector. You come across as one of those types of people. So what is it? Is it a calling working in that sector? Is it something to do with not wanting to sort of earn money for a director of a private company or something like that? What is it that draws you, or what drives you in that way?
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing.
Charity sector. I personally, it's just the reward of being able to do something that you are good at, being able to do something that makes a difference to other people, and be paid for it. And so you get those three things, and what's not to like? I suppose for me, I never ever went into it to earn a lot of money. I kind of accepted that very early on. But then, how much money do you really need? I mean, this is starting to get, you get into existential questions, and it's quite a body of research out there that says that in terms of your own happiness in your life, there's an ideal amount of money, which means you can pay your bills, you can pay your mortgage, you can buy food, and you can have nice experiences in your life. Beyond that amount, I can't remember exactly what it is, but I suspect it's between sort of 40, 50K. Beyond that amount, it's the law of diminishing returns. The more you earn does not buy you more happiness. It's happiness is not money. And so I didn't know that at the time, but it didn't particularly bother me. But then I suppose if you are good at what you do have choices to take on more responsibility and earn more money. But if you go into any career just looking for money, then you are the likelihood is you're going to be miserable, aren't you?
Yeah.
So I think the opportunity to make a difference to other people. My mum was a pediatric physiotherapist working at a special school. And so I don't know whether some of it came from there or just whether it's just part of you, whether you just have that kind of, I wouldn't call it a calling at all. I'd say it just seemed to make sense to me. Well, hang on, I can do a job that I really quite enjoy and be paid for it. Great. I thought work was supposed to be miserable.
Yeah, it's that adage, isn't it? Love what you do and do what you love, or the other way around. I can't remember.
And I got to tie in some other cool stuff as well. So I got to, run marathons and walk up mountains. So, it just ticks a lot of boxes for me.
Yeah, that does sound cool. So focusing on Clare House, Clare House has obviously been voted one of the University of Liverpool's Live to Give charities, both last year and this year. So taking from that, the charity is very close to many of our staff members' hearts. What advice would you give to someone that would like to start supporting a charity during the pandemic?
So the first question is, what's stopping you? Because there's lots of different ways that you can support any charity. And so the first question is pick A, what's stopping you? B, pick something that's really close to your heart. So for whatever reason, it needs to matter to you. Otherwise you won't have the motivation to do it. All of us at some point in our lives will be touched by the work of a charity. And so find the range of charity or charities that you would love to make a difference to. So that would be number one. Number two is then interact with that charity in a way that gives you what you need. So it's kind of you need a bit of self-awareness in there to know, well, actually, I really love running, so I'm going to do a marathon or whatever. Or I love walking up mountains, so I'm going to do that. Or I love the sense of community that I get from being with people, so I'll go and volunteer in a shop. Or I really like desk-based research, and so I'd like to volunteer my time to help an organisation to forward a bit of work they're doing. So I know that we had one of the Liverpool Uni students who did some research for us on equality and diversity, which has helped to shape our approach to E&D within Clare House. So that's a good example of, even in lockdown, people can do stuff to help. But the key is it should really matter to you. Clare House is a real privilege because I think people support us for lots of different reasons, but at the top of the tree it is genuinely awful to think that we have, even in our area, in the area of Merseyside, we would support nearly 100 children at the end of their lives every year. And that is vital that happens. And that can only happen in partnership between a charity like Clare House and the NHS. So we work in partnership with other agencies to make sure that as many children and families as possible have the best possible experience at the end of that child's life. And then that has that knock-on impact of maybe families stay together. Maybe the healthy siblings of that child can get through school and get decent grades and, live their life without regret. And it's maybe that mums and dads kind of know that they did the very best they could for their child at that time, despite the terrible circumstances, but they have that memory of knowing I did everything I could. And so the long-term impact of that care has a wider impact on society, which touches many more people than we perhaps recognise. And I think so. There's a reason there to support a charity like Clare House, which is quite compelling, and that then builds the motivation into fundraising and volunteering.
Yeah, that's definitely a compelling case. And I guess it's not just the outcomes for the children that we're talking about. There's an outcome for the person who's volunteering, isn't there? There's an outcome for people getting involved. Do you think that's the biggest thing for that, is their own sense of well-being, or is there something else in there?
Every volunteer will have a different motivation. So I did some research around volunteering motivations as part of an MBA a few years ago. And what we found was that it's tuning into those motivations that is vital, so that you're not perhaps placing people in the wrong roles or not interacting with them in the right way, because the relationship with a volunteer is very different to a paid member of staff. I would say, it's listening. It's boxes are you trying to tick here? Is it community? Is it furthering your career opportunities? Is it that you need a sense of kind of making a difference in the world? And so most of the time it's a Venn diagram of all of these different things. So the biggest feedback that we get is that sense of pride. So we try really hard to help people to understand the direct difference that they make. So we're always writing kind of these case studies of children and families that have been helped as a result of someone's support during that period of time that they've been raising money or volunteering for us. And we want it to be a symbiotic relationship. You want it to be genuinely a joyful experience. So our role is kind of, it might seem funny, doesn't it? Children's hospice, dealing with quite a difficult subject, but also dealing in joy. Joy is our currency, Look at what you did. Look at this life that you changed. Look at these lives that you have changed. And that's just massively rewarding for everyone involved. So when that fundraiser hits their target, to be able to write to them and say, the £1,000 you've raised has changed all of these child's lives. You've paid for X number of family meals around the table, or X number of hydrotherapy sessions, or all of this counselling, or the team that support that child at the end of their life. You can make it really real for people. And, you just feel like you've done your job then as either a fundraiser or as a charity. You feel like everybody won, everybody got to feel like they made a difference in the world. So that's kind of, that's the pinnacle. That's where we feel like the relationships really work. And it's not just this one way Clare House takes and says, thanks very much. And off you go. It's very much kind of, we want people to feel that sense of joy.
So David, do you have any personal experiences of volunteering that you could share with us?
It's funny, isn't it? You ask that question and you don't realise that you volunteer when you volunteer. It doesn't really occur to you. So I think sometimes people think volunteering is a very formal thing and a very formal relationship. I probably started this when I was doing the Duke of Edinburgh's Award when I was 16, 17, and I volunteered at my mum's school to help with a disabled sports club. And so I volunteered every Monday, and it was way out of my comfort zone. It was way beyond what I was used to. So I used to do that every week. And then more recently, obviously through university, you do bits of volunteering that you don't really consider volunteering because you're following your passion. And then through the kids, as your kids get older, you then find yourself volunteering at their clubs, don't you? So I do quite a bit with my daughter's running club. And again, I was kind of dragged into it. So, I do a bit of running. And so once people realize that, they then start to drag you in, or could you come down to the track and help us with a session? And it's way outside my comfort zone. I'm quite happy running on my own. I don't really know what to do with a bunch of 13-year-old kids. And so I just lend my time and be told what to do. So help one of my mates, just give me the training session, tell me what it is you want me to do. And then obviously, as Alex said, through the school as well. So being on the governing body, which again, I learn loads from, because again, it's outside of my comfort zone. It's just, I didn't know how schools worked, not really. And so they threw me onto the finance committee, which was kind. And so you do all these bits that you do in your life that you don't really consider to be volunteering. And then you look back and go, oh, I do a bit of volunteering. I love the stuff that I love the most are the things that you feel proud of at the end of the day. And you think, do you know what? I was really nervous as heck for that training session, or, meet a whole bunch of kids you never met before who are relying on you to guide them through a session, or to stop them getting lost in Coldy Woods. Or on a governor session where you're trying to understand how the finances of a school work. And it's really rewarding. I just find it, learning something new with new people, at the time I find very nerve-wracking. But when you look back, you go, oh, wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. And it was way more rewarding than I ever thought it would be. So you feel proud of yourself, don't you? And I think a lot of people would be put off volunteering because that first step feels like a really massive step. But I think a lot of people volunteer without realizing it. And then it's building that confidence to say, well, no, you could do more, and it's not as scary as you think it's going to be. And the scariest bit is the first step. Once you've taken the first step, everything else falls into place. I'm wondering if Matt did any volunteering.
No, I don't. I don't do any volunteering. No. And it's something that came up in a team meeting at work a few months back, actually, just right at the beginning of the pandemic. We all got very excited about doing a beach clean as part of some of our volunteering days that we get as part of the university's sort of allowance of volunteering days. And it was at that point I thought, yeah, that sounds good to me. I'm going to do stuff like that. And then the pandemic hit, and I didn't continue it. I did start to raise money during the pandemic though, which is something I've never ever done before. So I got on my bike through August, broke my arm at the end of it, didn't quite meet the target I was supposed to meet, but still did a good job of raising about £400 for charity. So yeah, and there's a lot in that felt really, really good. So it's something I'm definitely going to be taking forward, because it just, as a selfish point of view, the benefits for my own well-being, just doing those sort of things, are actually huge.
I think you're right. I think exactly what you're saying. There's so many benefits to volunteering. And I like what you said, David, about, particularly on the governing board that you and I both sit on, I learn so much more than I give. We've got a real privileged position to be on a governing board full of people who are at the top of their careers. And I just sit back and watch in terms of the way that people engage with each other, and the way that, who knew even this time last year that we'd be leading a school through a pandemic and making it up as we go along. So it's a real privilege to sit on that board. One thing I've specifically noticed about you on that board, which is really interesting, has really challenged me, is you usually lead with a question. So instead of just launching in and telling people, well, this is the way we should do things, you often, or usually, ask the rest of the governors or me or the head teacher a question to get us thinking, and then you give your perspective. And I really, really like that technique. Is that something that you've used in terms of your leadership at Clare House, specifically thinking now about how you've led through a pandemic? So kind of what leadership qualities and skills have you really had to employ over recent months?
So I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the habit I find hardest, I think it's number 4, which is seek first to understand. I hate it. I love it, but I hate it because, you're being very kind and listening to my experiences and opinions now. But normally I have to dial that right back and shut up, sit on my hands, because otherwise you just take over meetings with opinions. And who cares about people's opinions? They're just opinions. What you want to do is you want to hear from the experts. You want to kind of go, right, I maybe got a seed of an idea or an opinion in the back of my head. I'm going to try and push that out of the way and work out how to frame that as a question. So I'm going to test an opinion rather than or try and ask an open question, because my opinion is just an opinion. I think that's a really hard realization, that you've had this kind of range of experiences in your life, but they're quite linear. They're just you. And if you're in a meeting with 10 other people, there's 10 brains in the room that you could be using. And, we all hate sitting meetings, don't we, when you've got someone who's just on one. And we've all got them, you've all got those people who you think, oh, grief, we've got so-and-so in the meeting and they're just going to talk. And you can't, no matter what you do, you can't shut them up. And there's a place for that, because it does, people who liven up meetings like that will generate debate. But I think that learning, for me, I'm glad you've noticed. I try really hard because it's not natural. I'd much rather give my opinion, thanks very much, than listen. But when you realize that by giving that space, you're providing value, you're widening a debate and you're bringing in people who perhaps wouldn't normally speak, that's performance. Then you're getting a much more enjoyable interaction. You might learn something yourself. There's a great an Indian proverb, and I think it says something like, listen or thy tongue will keep thee deaf. So that idea of every time you're speaking, just like I am now, you're not hearing someone else's experience, so you're not learning and growing. You're just handing out wisdom, which is only your wisdom, So I think it's a really important part of leadership. And I would so look at someone like Bill Gates. He's just a massively inquisitive man. And you meet people who are genuinely inquisitive, and you think, I want to be like that, because someone like that has got the size of his brain is incomprehensible, and yet he doesn't sit there necessarily giving his opinion. He's there going, well, tell me more about you or your ideas or your views. And it's just so someone like that can be focused on asking the questions. Then that's something perhaps all of us could learn from, particularly in leadership. And I think applying that to a pandemic, really understanding that feeling of we're all in the same storm but different boats. It's so easy to assume that everyone's having the same experience. And at Clare House, that's just not been the case. So we've got a care team that are working, as far as they can as normal, being there for children and families in their own homes, in hospital, and then at the hospice. And then we've got people in administrative roles that kind of have to work from home unless they're directly supporting the care team. Then you've got a fundraising team that haven't been able to do a lot of their job over the last year. A retail team where at the moment shops are all shut. And then 1,000 volunteers, of which perhaps 800 of them have not been able to fulfill their role. So you kind of have all of those experiences that are all different. So trying to, I think in leadership terms, trying to tune in to that fact that every single person you're speaking to has got a different experience. Don't just assume that you've got the solution. Listening is more powerful than giving opinions. Feeling listened to is a really powerful human need, I think. Actually, somebody's bothered to listen. Someone's bothered to ask a question. Someone's bothered to say, how are you, and listen to the response. It can be as simple as that.
I like that Indian proverb. I think one of the ones I like is the Mark Twain one, where he says, if we were meant to talk more than listen, we'd have 2 mouths and 1 ear. It's one of my favorites. So I mean, is there anything specific that you've done as a leader to maintain morale and motivation with your staff during this time?
My general feeling is people are tired, tired and worn down. Even the most well-balanced, on it person is feeling a bit like, we've had enough now. And so it's very difficult to kind of, we can't take responsibility for other people's feelings and experiences all the time. We can a bit. So as an organization, we try really hard. And so I think listening is crucial. I think we provide lots of opportunities for interaction. So one of the really fun things that we've done is introduced a big call. So a whole organization call where anyone can join it. And we'd never have done this if it wasn't for COVID. And lots of organizations are doing it, again, way outside of my comfort zone. I just send out an invite to a Teams call once a month, and it's open to everyone. Anyone can join it. And we usually get about between 70 to 90 people on these calls from across the organization. So again, that whole range of people. And I usually do a bit at the start, which is kind of, hi everyone, hope you're okay, a little bit of banter. And then we descend into kind of some serious stuff where we talk about how we're doing across the organization, what's going on in care, how we're doing financially, which has been, a terrible year for most people. The impact of that. So we've had to make some quite tough changes. It has included some redundancies, which is not what we wanted, not what we planned, but you can't hide from the truth. So I think fronting that and being honest about that is really important. Don't lie to people, tell them the truth. And then we then do a shout outs. So we introduce perhaps a bit like a radio show. You kind of bring in a couple of people who are going to lighten the mood a bit, because usually what I've got to say is either a bit dull or a bit too serious. And who wants to sit through that once a month? So we bring in 2 or 3 teams that are doing something interesting, cool, different, uplifting, usually something from fundraising or volunteering or care or, kind of rooting us in. This is what we're here to do. This is how we're doing. And then the third thing we do is shout outs. So anybody can send me somebody who just deserves to be mentioned. And we usually get 10 minutes worth, and I just read through verbatim what I'm sent. And quite regularly, it seems to end in people in tears. And I'm there desperately trying to read off a script and keep myself going. And I can hear kind of, there's just same as Zoom, little chat box on the side, and people are throwing in all sorts of, compliments and nice things in there, a bit of banter. And it's just I find them really uplifting, those calls, even though they've got quite a significant, serious element to them. They've also got the fun element to them as well. So it's an opportunity for us to live our values, one of which is fun, another of which is together we're stronger. So that's something we would never have done if it wasn't for COVID, but it was very much, again, outside of my comfort zone. I just thought, I tested it out with a few people. I said, what do you think? They said, well, God knows how to work for us. Why don't we just try? So I just sent out the invite, and we pretty much made it up as we went along.
It sounds great. It sounds really...
it's not as stressful as I thought it would be. So I used to dread them. You think, oh God, here we go. You get all keyed up for it. But now we've got a format, and it shows you it's not all about planning and getting something perfect. Sometimes you just got to go with stuff. And then the other that we do quite a bit to try to open conversations with people. So in clinical terms, we have clinical supervision, an opportunity just for the care team to talk through their experiences, particularly of care over a period of time, to make sure that they're not going home with too much kind of unpacked or closed baggage. It's trying to unpack it and just make sure people have got an opportunity to talk. The advantage of providing a service in the middle of a pandemic is that people do actually see each other. So we've not been quite as badly hit in those terms as a lot of organisations have. And then we do some pretty basic stuff around employee assistance programs and counselling for people who need it. And but it's been, the jewels have been those things that have been owned by people outside of leadership. So the person who wants to organise the gym drinking evening, I'm led to believe, and I have seen videos of how that went. It seems to go very well.
Great.
And that's great. So those things are happening when they come from within an organisation and you just give the organisation license to just do stuff, just give it a go, see what happens.
Yeah,
that's when not the leadership or the top down stuff, which is pretty basic. It's nice to see things coming from within, and that's helped to lift people, I think, and keep people going.
Yeah,
that sense of organisational community.
We've definitely seen that in our organisation as well, haven't we, Matt? Where people have been really creative in thinking of different ways to motivate and to be there for each other, which has been so important. How about engaging with outside organisations? For example, the university, has that supported some of your kind of motivation and morale as well?
It's lovely to know that people care, because you kind of, at the start of all this, you think, well, actually our whole world is falling apart. And the day that Rishi Sunak announced the furlough scheme, that was, I'd spent the day thinking, what on earth are we going to do? Because we've got 25 shops that we're going to have to close, and we can't pay people. We just can't. We can't pay people. I genuinely don't know what we're going to do, because we'd already then realised there was going to be a significant £1 million hit on our fundraising, plus then a £500,000 profit hit on shops. But the shops were, they're a £2 million turnover. So you've got all of that cost that suddenly just is, you're absolutely snookered. So I'd spent a couple of days in panic in a kind of, not in a, it wasn't, you just have to front it. You just have to think, well, okay, we'll deal with what we can deal with as it happens. So the way through, I think, was quite difficult to see at the very start. And to know then as we kind of hit that first couple of months, we still had that kind of feeling of people being out there caring. So you went from a very lonely position of thinking, we're really up against it here, to then thinking, do you know what? Even if this year is horrible, it looks as though our supporters are going to stick with us through thick and thin. And so the relationships we have with supporters like Liverpool University, it doesn't matter the volume. People get very focused on the targets and the kind of the £100,000 relationships. It's not that. It's knowing that where people's hearts are, knowing that they care, knowing that they believe in what you do, knowing that they might not be able to support you at that point, but they're there for you. And even through thick and thin, that I think you did a Christmas jumper day, raised £500, fantastic. And I think you also did a staff survey where £1 was donated for every survey that was completed to 3 different charities, including Clare House. So it's just being there in the consciousness that makes the right person go, oh, we can make this into a fundraising opportunity. And when that money comes through, hopefully we do a decent job of thanking you, but also it's great for us because we think, well, actually, no, we're okay. We just need to get through. Just carry on, take each day as it comes, keep getting through, because those supporters, those volunteers, those organisations that care will still be there the other side of that. So it gives us hope and motivation.
You've mentioned finances as being obviously one of the most challenging thing probably in 2020 for you. Those opportunities for fundraising just would have completely vanished, I imagine. So looking forward, and as the CEO of Clare House, what do you think are the biggest challenges that are coming your way?
So we've got a rocky road this year coming. So our financial year runs April through to March. So we get this year out of the way. We've survived this year because of government grants. So the furlough scheme has really helped. And then in the hospice sector, we've had some grants that have helped us continue to provide those services, because obviously the government doesn't want, can see the pressure on the NHS, and then we pick up that secondary pressure. So no one wins if we're not there to be able to support these children and families. So that's been a lifesaver, that government support. Although it's been erratic and difficult to plan, everyone else has had it worse than we have. Next year, that will obviously change. So the government will want to try and get us back to some kind of normal functioning society, but fundraising isn't a tap that you just turn on and off. And so we are trying to be kind of sensible and cautious with our planning. I talked a little bit about redundancies, and we have had to change the way that we work. We're focused on impact. So let's focus on the things that make the biggest impact throughout the whole organisation. So rather than make this a conversation about money, let's make it a conversation about impact. Not all things we do are of equal value. And that's quite hard when you could point to anything, any of our services, particularly, you point to any of our services and say, well, they all add value. They do. But not all things we do are of equal value. So we would always prioritize end of life care as being that's the one thing we would never, ever stop. You know, it'd have to be a pretty dire day if we didn't do that. Have to be efficient and effective in our fundraising. So again, not all fundraising ideas are great ideas. So let's focus on the stuff that is giving us that kind of bigger return. And I think the third party fundraising through and volunteering through Liverpool University is a great example of that. You've got a team in place that know what they're doing. They just need the right conditions to be able to get out there and do the fundraising and volunteering. So we know that will come back, and it doesn't require us to put in weeks and weeks of support work. You know, we'll gladly do what you guys need us to do, but those relationships that kind of have the infrastructure to be able to support a charity independently are great. So it's a tough year ahead, and we also keep some savings to balance out the bumps in the road. So we've got some savings which just allow us to have that kind of rocky period next year where we've got a huge amount of uncertainty, in the hope that by the time we get to 2022, we've just got hopefully ever increasing certainty over where our funding is going to come from at that point. That's not to say we might not have to change further during the next year, but I think we're much more on the front foot now. We've kind of been able to confront change, face into it, accept it. You know, you can kind of rationalize it, can't you? You can say it's horrible, but we have to do it. It doesn't mean it's any less horrible. So when I've been speaking to staff on our bigger calls or one-to-ones, being able to say, do you know, it is horrible to have to say goodbye to friends. You know, it wasn't saying that they weren't doing a good job. It wasn't saying that we don't like them. It hurts, but we have to do the right thing for the children and families. And long term, that means keeping Clare House in the right place financially so that we can care for as many children and families as we can going forwards. And those two things are different things. So once you separate them out, it becomes a little bit easier to cope with. And also trying to share that responsibility. So we now have, one of the things we did during the pandemic was to really extend our leadership team. So we had a executive leadership team, which was relatively small and probably fit for purpose of about 5 years ago. We realized that we'd got this kind of 20 odd leaders within the organization that we just needed to have around the table to be able to manage our response to the pandemic. And so we've kept that forum, and we're trying to now push as much work as we can through those 20 leaders rather than the 5 or 6, which then extends the responsibility. But then you're back to this concept of having 20 brains on the problem. You know, it's not me saying, right, I think we should do this, this, and this, and this is what we're going to do. You know, at best, you might get lucky and some of it will work. Whereas if you engage with those 20 fantastic, intelligent, talented people, it might take you a bit longer to hit kind of the action plan, but you'll have a far more robust action plan and we've got that skin in the game. Everyone cares that it succeeds. And so that going into next year is really exciting. You know, everybody cares that this works, and everybody has got they've got the skin in the game. They care. They've got a vested interest that their bit of the plan comes off because they've been listened to and they've had an opportunity to shape what we're doing as an organisation. So it's not we're a long way from being out of the woods, but I think we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, which feels better than it did 6 months ago, which just felt like this long, like unending, very dark place. And so we are also lucky to be providing frontline services, which means a number of our staff have already had their first and some of them second vaccinations, which again, just is a really privileged position to be in.
So obviously you can't fundraise in the same way, but it's like those straight donations, have they massively decreased as well? Is it a case of everyone looking after their own? Yeah,
there is a bit of fundraising fatigue. So I think when the pandemic first started, there was this kind of, we're all in it together, let's fundraise. Yeah. Everyone fundraised for the NHS, which is
crazy.
Well, I mean, I personally find that really frustrating, but I'm aware that that's the motivation to fundraise was not to fundraise the NHS. It was the motivation of, we want to be part of solving this pandemic.
Yeah.
And the NHS is doing that work. So it's completely natural that people wanted to help their local hospital. I completely get it. It's just that or thinking about it at a different level. You're thinking, well, hang on, you're fundraising for a publicly funded body. The organisations that really need the fundraising are the charities that aren't going to survive this. And there will be a lot of charities that do not survive the 2 years this will take, minimum 2 years it will take for us to get out of this. And Clare House isn't one of them, but we've got, I think we've probably seen £1 million hit on our income, and that's being relatively conservative. It's just that we've been able to mitigate for that through government grants. So it hides the real problem, which is then why we've had to look at, because we could have just carried on as we were, blindly kind of put our hands over ears and go, well, it'll all be fine. No, it won't. It's really not going to be fine unless we do something about it. So we've had to reduce our wage bill in the knowledge that next year is going to be quite tough.
Yeah.
But that's been mercifully quite straightforward in a very heartless way. If you're not thinking about the people side of it and just thinking about, right, what roles do we absolutely need and what roles sit outside of those plans for the next couple of years, that's been quite straightforward. It's just that the people side of it is horrible. I didn't come into this job to ever make people redundant. No. So it's been crap for us, but much worse for a lot of others. Yeah. Because people are fundraising less, but also that fundraising has been diverted into the NHS, but for completely understandable reasons.
Thank you, David. There's been so much in that conversation that I know I want to go away and reflect on and think about. We like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips for our listeners to reflect on. The name of this podcast is the Developing Practice Podcast. So is there anything that you can share with us that you could leave with our listeners just to help them to think about their own personal practice and maybe enhance that in the future?
So I may or may not get this right, so we'll see. I've written down 4 things. First up is back to the Stephen Covey 7 habits. Seek first to understand. As I said, it's the one habit I find most difficult, and it takes years of practice to get anywhere close to genuinely seeking first to understand. I think in pandemic times, listening to somebody else's experience and listening to how things genuinely are for other people is a really important part of, or something we can do to help other people and their well-being. Really seek to understand people. Second one was be brave. Probably the thing you're scared of doing is the thing you should be doing. And applying that to Clare House, it was probably facing into the pandemic and saying, well, actually, what really is the impact of this, and not ignoring it. And then once you've accepted the awfulness of it, you can then start to work on it and translate it into practical action. But even to the extent that if there's somebody that you think, well, I hope I don't see such and such today, there's a reason for that. And they're probably the absolute right person that you should be trying to bump into on that day. Give them a call on Zoom or Teams, see how they are. Because that's a relationship that clearly needs some work. So be brave. Third one is ask for feedback. I don't like getting feedback. I mean, who likes getting feedback? You probably do as educators. You're keen on feedback. I try hard to ensure people can give me feedback on how I'm doing, and try hard to listen to the response, and the reason I'm motivated to do that is because the alternative is people are thinking it and saying it anyway. So if somebody's thinking, oh, David's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, or I wish he'd do this, that, and the other, I'm probably better off knowing it now than knowing it when I retire. Because you imagine your retirement party, you have that retirement party, people have had a couple of beers, a couple of glasses of Prosecco, and then someone runs up to you and said, you know what? I never liked you. I always found you really frustrating to work with because of this, this, and this. Now, I'd like to think I've got maybe, 15, 20 years work left in me. I'm better off knowing those things now, and I can choose to do something about it. I can choose not to, but feedback is painful. I mean, it's all, feedback is painful, but there's always, no matter how painfully it might be delivered, there's always some truth in it. So that would be number 3. And the final one is then general well-being. I'd say invest in yourself. So it's so easy to put others first. And by that, I mean sometimes your job. And I try to book at least 30 minutes a day of something for me. And that might be just nipping out for a run. So yesterday I got half an hour and just ran to Red Rocks and back, which is the tip of the Wirral. Just ran to Red Rocks and back and felt a lot better afterwards. Like you were saying, Alex, at the start, just get out and do something for you. I think you are what you eat. You are what you do. You are how you think. So eat well, do stuff that makes you feel good, spend time with people who make you feel good, sleep well, try to be positive. That's like 10 things in one. But it really is put time and effort into you. If putting time and effort into you makes you 5% better that day, then why wouldn't you do it?
Wonderful. Thank you, David. There's so much in that. We've really appreciated and enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
It's been great fun. Thanks very much. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I really enjoyed that conversation with David, and it's been really lovely to get to know him over the last couple of years through our work as governors at the local primary school, and also sharing lifts to gymnastics with our children. I've really enjoyed talking to him about his leadership style. It seems he often leads with a question rather than a directive, and I've seen him do that time and time again. I like what he said about Covey's work, and where Covey says that we should seek first to understand. And that's really evident in the approach that he takes to leadership. He says he tries really hard to hear people first before he gives his own opinion. And then when he does give his opinion, he's seeking to test that opinion rather than present it as fact. So I'm going to reflect on that in terms of my practice.
Yeah, I agree with that. Right from the beginning of our chat, we got a real insight into how David leads at Clare House. He spoke about being willing to be put into any situation and to support his team in any activity they wish. And that style to encourage from behind rather than putting his own ego first has obviously led to him becoming a really successful leader in that sector.
If you'd like to take your thinking further, we've added some further resources to the website on a specific podcast reading list that you can access at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. And you can also find on there the link to Live to Give, which will detail the 3 charities that we're supporting this year. Also, let us know what you thought about the episode at Live Uni Academy. And you can also find us at eLearnerMatt and me at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
Yep, and we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you are an Apple user, please do take the time to review our show, as it really will help others find us. Bye for now.